Alright, we're back with another penetration test. If you saw the Untitled one, you're gonna want to see this one. This one's with a bow and arrow, but I already know that through past experience that the modern primitive stuff that I make shoots real fast, heavy arrows, good sharp stone points. It'll glide right through this every time. It absolutely does. We've proved that over and over. Of course, you can check all that stuff out at gillsprimitivearchery.com. But what I'm going to shoot with it today is a way more primitive version of the bow. And this is not meant to be a fast, high-performing bow. This is a very authentic representation of what primitive peoples shot. It's not a fancy bow. It's a straight-handled, doesn't really bend a whole lot in the handle, but it's a flat-handled bow, and it doesn't have any recurves on the tips. It is not built to be super fast. No backing. It's literally carved out of a sapling, and that's what we're shooting. We're shooting a sinew bowstring, which I've had great luck with sinew over other materials. Pretty low stretch, pretty good stuff. The arrow that we're shooting is a river cane arrow, and it's got goose 2 fletch on it, and it's not even a pretty 2 fletch, but it gets the job done. And we're shooting a tiny little Madison or Pinellas point. This one's made out of agatized coral, and it's a really sharp little bugger, and it's only, I bet you it's probably only 30 or so grains, and it's maybe about 3/4 of an inch wide. And this is really a representation of what true arrow points were. They weren't big points, and it was for reasons like this. You're shooting bows that aren't super performing bows, and these are supposed to give us better penetration, just like we saw in the Untitled video, shooting throwing the big points versus the small points. So let's step back, let's shoot this shield with it. Again, this is, we're looking at a pretty thick shield here, about 1 inch thick, and this is kind of our toughest area in here. So we're just going to aim for right there, and let's see how this does. This bow, just to make some mention of it, like I said, it's not a super performing bow like my other ones. My other ones I shoot 160, 170, sometimes dip into 180 feet per second on a 10 grains per arrow. This one is pretty darn slow. It's about 134 feet per second. It is not a fast bow, but it's an authentic representation. Let's shoot it. Let's see how it does. And that is something to really think about. When people say, and I've heard it many times over, when people say stone points penetrate as well as steel points, it is not true. They may do just as well on a light enough or thin enough target, but this tells you everything that you need to know. It did not even penetrate that shield. It broke the tip off. It broke it right off the arrow. It never penetrated. And it tells you how tough it is to actually shoot animals. Now a deer, we don't have a problem. We'll shoot this right into a deer. There is no problem whatsoever. I've done it. It'll go through them. It'll kill them. We'll be just fine. It may not come out the other side, but it'll definitely get it done. Now, of course, like I said before, the higher performance bows that we build, Gill's Primitive Archery, you could shoot a bigger arrowhead and it'll go through this. But this is more the historically accurate end of it, and we want to test it out. We want to see how it does. Obviously, a pig or a big boar like this, it's got a pretty good shield. It'll stop them. But tell you what, let's step back. Let's shoot a steel pointed arrow at it, and we'll see how it does. Same bow, and I'll show you that arrow here real fast, and then we'll step back and we'll shoot it, and you'll see for yourself how steel does compared to stone. Alright, and here's our steel point. Now it's a considerably bigger point, but this one's made out of a spoon. It's one of the trade points that I make, and these definitely have less issues with penetration. So even though it's wider, it's a whole lot sleeker. So it takes less resistance. So let's just pretend that we took that stone pointed arrow, even with that little bird point, compared to this, and we put them right on and we push with equal amount of pressure. The steel point is going to penetrate at a faster rate than the stone point did. That's just how stone actually works versus steel. So now that we have a target that's capable of stopping the stone point, let's shoot it with the steel point. Now, I do want to make a mention that this just does not say that stone points are not worth doing. I shoot deer and pigs and even an elk now every year with stone points, and I kill them. but it's the proper application of the proper stone point, the proper arrow weight, and the proper bow performance to get the job done. And if you want to shoot a slower, very authentic bow just like this, for deer, you really probably won't have any trouble, providing you actually shoot them like back in the ribs, not on the shoulder that's very hard to penetrate. But likewise, I think we're going to be surprised, because I've done this before and I already know what to expect, that this one is going to penetrate through this shield. And that is the thickest part of the shield that we have, is right in here, and I was actually aiming for about here, and we penetrated it pretty much without any problem, and it went in that far. And that's the same bow, the same exact bow, same sinew string. The arrow is probably within 20 or 30 grains of the other arrow. So the only difference really, this one has a wider metal point on it that takes less pounds of energy to penetrate initially than the stone point did. So I think this is a definitive case of saying steel outperforms stone. And I've never been afraid to say that. Steel does. It absolutely does outperform stone. Even a much bigger steel point compared to a much smaller stone point on an equal weight arrow, you would think, oh, well, I'll get the same amount of penetration. But the stone takes a lot more energy to get that initial penetration. Once it's inside, it's fine. But that initial penetration, it takes a lot more, because it's not that sleek aerodynamic edge that just wants to melt into everything. So keep that in mind, whatever you're shooting in the future. And when you always say, or when I always say, hey, I recommend bows that are, 50 pounds and pretty good performers if you want to shoot stone points, this is why right here. All right, put your money where your mouth is. That's what I'm expecting to hear. Hey, shoot one of your high performance bows and prove that it will go through this. So that's what I did. I brought out my U-bow. I killed a deer with this one last year, and it shoots about 160 or so feet per second. So it's significantly better than the primitive bow we just shot. And this one is more of a modern interpretation. It's the same technology, better string, better build, got a little bit of reflex tips on it. This one's actually rawhide backed and braced backwards while it dries. And so it's a better performing bow. And I shoot a very low draw length, only about 22 inches. And even at that, we're still looking at like 160 feet per second. And then this arrow, cane arrow, it's pretty much about the same weight, about 520 grains plus or minus a little bit. And it's still got it's a little bit bigger of a stone point, but it's not terribly bigger. This is the size that I really like to hunt with. It's maybe in the 60 to 70 grain range, and it will penetrate really, really well. You can do a little bit bigger with deer. Something like this, I'm not going to want to get much bigger than this, but it's still bigger than the little Pinellas point that we just shot off of the real primitive bow that failed to even penetrate. So go ahead, let's step on back, let's shoot this one and see how this one does. Alright, and here you can see where it was denied with even the smaller point. It was denied off the real primitive bow. This one did penetrate with it. And again, this bow is probably, mid to upper 50s at my draw length, and shoots about 160 feet per second. And through deer, it shoots through deer. It gets out both sides. We typically don't have a problem with that. This one penetrated, I can't get the stone point back out without yanking it off, about 6 or 8 inches. So this would actually be a dead pig, and that's shooting a pretty good size target here. And then it probably foam, I believe, is a little bit more dense than an actual hog's body is on the inside. But we got through the shield. We did it, and that's a fresh spot. That's not hitting on another one. There's no other cuts right around it. It did cut completely through it. So there is a difference when you're shooting a higher performance bow. You can get the penetration on stuff like this, or those bigger deer even, especially if you hit them on the shoulder, where you have to get through the meat and everything. You can get better penetration with a higher performance bow and an overall better setup with stone points than you can the really primitive stuff. But that's what we do at Gill's Primitive Archery. We build high performance bows. Now I do offer the lot more primitive models, but you have to know that going in mind. You don't want to order a 40-pound bow and expect that you're going to just blow through this kind of stuff. It doesn't work like that. So this should be a real good representation as to what you can expect when you take primitive bows or modern interpretations of primitive bows hunting. And again, you want to keep the weights up, the point size down, the arrows heavy, and flying really true. You don't want any wobble, and you'll be just fine, even on the biggest of animals just like these. Alright guys, subscribe to my channel so we can learn some more about this stuff. The more subscriptions we get, the more encouragement I get to make more videos. So of course we're always going to be doing the hunting videos. We'll do some how-to videos, and you know I like to do the penetration test videos. So please subscribe either via email in the link in the description, or with the little red subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. Alright, well thanks, and check out the next video.